Welcome back to the Countdown. I'm your Countdown host, MJ Book, back for another countdown here in the world of the Countdown. Hope all of you are doing good. I want to thank you all for listening or watching, whichever you're doing. Appreciate all of you. Hope everybody's having had a good weekend. Right now, it's beginning of a brand new week. Just kind of chilling out at the home and decided, let's go out and go back out to the 123 studios and get a recording doing. I have an episode ready, and decided finally, since I got it done, that I might as well do it because this one took me a little bit to finish, and it's simple. It's the continuation of that fan request of doing the favorite movies throughout the 80s. Last episode, I covered 1987. That was a rough one. This was right on par as far as rough. The rest of the 80s should be easier. Crossing my fingers that it should be easier, the rest of the 80s. But still got a few to go. Got eight, still got 5 more years after this to cover. But this is 1986. The movies of 1986. And 1986 had some pretty good movies that came out that year. It was a good year in the movie era. And for yours truly started off that year. Now, again, my math is horrific. I started off the year 7. My birthday's in August. And then I would become 8 years old. So getting younger and younger and younger as we go through these movies, but still not too young. I remember watching these movies for the first time, each and every one of them. And I'm not going to do any honorable mentions, at least not at the beginning. I'll save those for the end because if I throw them off now, you might guess just what movies might be in this. So let's just start with the countdown. And this is a 10 spot countdown. Thank goodness I was able to get this to 10 just barely. Literally only like 15 minutes ago, I finished this and got it to a 10 spot. So here we go. Number 10 was directed by David Cronenberg. And it is horror, drama, sci-fi, and it stars Gina Davis, Jeff Goldblum, John Getz. You've probably already figured it out, but in case you haven't, The Fly. Now, The Fly is a remake off of the classic horror movie starring Vincent Price. This was a modern day take on that movie. Jeff Goldblum stars as Seth Brundle, this scientist who builds these two pods that can teleport him from one pod to the other. And one night, he goes on into one pod. Of course, he has to go in naked. And he goes into the pod, tests it on himself. He does not notice a little bitty fly flies in. And he gets teleported into the other pod. And at first, he doesn't think there's anything wrong. He thinks it works. Around this time, he meets Gina Davis, and she's falling for him. And then he starts to notice there's some things wrong. He's a little stronger. He's a little quicker. Things are starting to happen to him, and he doesn't quite understand what. And eventually, he figures out what's going on. Now, this movie back in the day, it was a little terrifying. It was one of those things that every time back in the day, around this time, I looked at a fly, I kind of gave it a second look, and I'm like, you better stay that size. Don't you get no bigger. And there was a disgusting scene in the movie talking about it. I've mentioned this on a previous countdown about how when Seth Brundle starts talking about how flies eat, they puke on what they're eating and suck it back up. Really disgusting. There's a guy watching it. We never see it, but you see his reactions and you can hear the sound effects. And it's gross. If anything, it's worse that you don't see it because your imagination is going. And that's something nowadays that you don't see. I mean, nowadays movies just throw everything out there for you because people just don't have the imagination maybe now, or they just don't have the time to think on their own. Not everybody, but some people do. The movie industry thinks that a lot. And thankfully, The Fly gave us the respect to just use our own imaginations, which is in many ways can be a lot more terrifying and sick than anything a writer or director can put up on the screen. The Fly, a great movie. It got a sequel, not good. It's not good at all. And that ended the franchise. I've heard for years they've wanted to redo The Fly again. Thank goodness nothing has really happened with that. But come on, it's horror movies. Horror movies get redone so many times. It wouldn't shock me if somewhere down the line somebody decides to remake The Fly. And all you can hope for is is tops this, because I have seen the Vincent Price one, and I of course saw Fly 2 and this, and of those three, this is the better one. Then Vincent Price, and then The Fly 2. What a just a piece of shit movie. Just bad. But this was a great movie. Jeff Goldblum, I didn't know a whole lot about him. I'd seen him in a couple of comedies, so I kind of looked at him as a comedic actor. This was kind of the first departure type thing I'd seen with him from there. And of course, he would have this had to have led to him in some ways getting the role in Jurassic Park. So this, like I said, this was a very good movie. The Fly, I believe I mentioned this movie in a previous countdown as far as horror movies. So I love this movie, and definitely urge everybody to watch this movie. It gets a little gross. It is violent. There's a lot more violent movies out there, but there are some scenes that are pretty doggone disgusting. But that's what we watch these movies for. So that's my number 10, The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum. Number nine. Number nine, this movie, well, this may, if there is anything that some folks may feel is controversial, and I don't think this is controversial, but for some people, they may not even think of this movie as being a best of in any year. But I love this movie, and this movie, in a way, had its own rework. Some people don't like it because of the director and what he did with it. I can understand that. I don't care. I loved it. It was directed by Michael Mann, and if you know that name, or if it's seeming familiar, two words, Miami Vice. This movie was like I said, directed by Michael Mann. It was written by Michael Mann as well, and based off of the book Red Dragon, written by Thomas Harris. This movie stars William Peterson, Kim Gerst, Joan Allen. Sound familiar? Maybe not. Manhunter. Now, if you're familiar with Red Dragon, which is with Edward Norton, then you pretty much already know what this movie is about. It's about a killer out there who calls himself, the Red Dragon, and he's out there just terrorizing, and the FBI can't find him, and so they go and recruit former profiler Will Graham. Now, Will Graham was played by, like I just said, Edward Norton in Red Dragon. This movie, he's played by William Peterson. If that name seems familiar, you might know him a little more as Grissom from CSI. I believe the first 6, 7.5 seasons he was in, and then he would pop in a couple of times after that. Uh, I love William Peterson. I think he's a great actor, and a lot of people don't talk about William Peterson that much. But he was my favorite character on CSI. And once he left, I was just done with the show. I own the complete series on DVD, but it's just hard getting at continuing to watch when he's not there. To this day, I still have not finished that series. It's just hard to watch it without Grissom. But Will Graham is called back into the field by his former boss, Jack Crawford, who's played by Dennis Farina, who was all over the 80s. You may not know the name, but you know the face. If anybody knows him for anything, he became a host when they retooled Unsolved Mysteries TV show. He became the host of Unsolved Mysteries, which is back on the air again now. Um, and this just follows that investigation. Now, the part that there's a few things people don't like. One, this does have a Miami Vice feel, and there are people who just will not like that. I loved Miami Vice, so that just didn't bother me. The other thing is people are probably going to be too used to Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, and they won't like the fact that there's no Anthony Hopkins in this. I get it, but here's the thing: Hannibal Lecter is barely, barely in Red Dragon. He's only in a couple of scenes in Manhunter. I mean, he's only in a couple of scenes, and in the book, he's not in it terribly much. He just isn't. This isn't a Hannibal Lecter story terribly much. So to punish it for something in which that character is really not in it that much, I think does a disservice to the movie. Plus, the actor who does play Lecter in this, his name is Brian Cox, actually does a good job as Lecter. I mean, he's no Anthony Hopkins, but he does do a good job. William Peterson, as I mentioned, I prefer him much more than the Edward Norton. Edward Norton's Will Graham was so nerdy and geeky. I couldn't believe he'd catch a cold, much less a killer. So William Peterson struck me more as a perfect Will Graham because Will had a little bit of a screw loose. You had to have a little bit of a screw loose to catch these kind of people. And I believe that far more with William Peterson than I did with Edward Norton. I looked at Edward Norton and just thought geek, nerd, dork, dweeb. That's all I thought, and I couldn't get past it. Not to say that Red Dragon isn't good. Ralph Fiennes is amazing in the movie. Uh, that's definitely something Red Dragon has over this because the killer is played in this movie by Tom Doonan. Tom Doonan, you might not know the name, you know the face. He was all over the place in the 80s. He was in RoboCop 2. He was just everywhere. You've seen the face because it is a he's got an odd looking. He's just an odd looking. He's unique looking, and that plays to the character. Uh, but has the 80s music, definitely classic 80s music. Some of the music was actually in Miami Vice. um, Look, I understand people's complaints about this movie. I really do. But obviously, Silence of the Lambs, of all the Hannibal Lecter movies, Silence of the Lambs is the best. This is, though, my second favorite of all the Hannibal Lecter, Thomas Harris movies. This is my second. This is a part of the franchises. I mentioned this in a previous countdown of favorite movie franchises. This is one of the reasons that movie or that series made it into the countdown. If you want to know where, go back and find out where it listed. But I would urge people to watch Manhunter and give it a chance. Manhunter, it is different. It's doesn't have the same feel like Red Dragon, which is much more modern. It doesn't have that 80s. The Manhunter does reek of the 80s. It totally reeks of the 80s. But if you can let that go, which I think you should be able to, and if you just forget the fact of Anthony Hopkins, it's not fair to this movie to judge it with because there's no Anthony Hopkins. This is a very good movie and definitely deserves your time to watch it. It is especially because of William Peterson's performance as Will Graham. I thought he did a great job. And honestly, I prefer Dennis Farina as Jack Crawford. So I would recommend giving this a try. I think it was a very good movie, very underrated. I haven't been able to talk about Manhunter on here too on this show too much, but this gave me a great opportunity to talk about Manhunter, which is why I'm still talking about it because I do think it is a under valued movie to a lot of people. A lot of people don't know it exists. You need to watch Manhunter, and that's my number 9 favorite movie of 1986, Manhunter. Okay, Number 8. We've had a horror movie. We had a drama, investigative slash horror, whatever you would like to call for Manhunter. We're going to get a little goofy. We're going to get into a comedy. And this is one of the biggest comedies of the 80s, period. Not just of the year, but the entire 80s. When you think of 80s, this is one of those things that people will think about. This is a John Hughes movie who, if there's a director who, there's certain directors who are, you just are synonymous with the 80s. John Hughes is one of them. Just the fact that I said John Hughes has probably already got you naming a few movies and wondering, is it this one? Is it this one? Is it that one? Which one is it? Well, this one, of course, directed, written by John Hughes. As soon as I say who's in it, the first name, you're going to already know who it is. But instead of saying his name, I'll just say a line from the movie. Okay, here we go. Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, starring Matthew Broderick and Alan Ruck and Mia Sara. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean, it's the 80s, and this is a comedy, and it's a John Hughes movie. Should we really go over a plot with this? Fine, whatever. Ferris Bueller is a popular kid. He's a wise guy. He's a smart aleck, popular kid. He decides to take a day off from school and goes off on an adventure. He goes with his girlfriend and his best friend and just has a ball and does all the things that we all wish we could do on a skip day. And he is followed through his skip day by his ever loving principal, who is played by Jeffrey Jones, who is another name you may not know, but he is all over the 80s. And just naming the stars I just said: Matthew Broderick, Mia Sara, Alan Ruck, and Jeffrey Jones. But there are a couple other people in this movie whose names you may know, like Jennifer Grey is in this movie. She plays Ferris Bueller's sister. Also, a young Charlie Sheen pops into this movie before we knew who he was. Charlie Sheen is in this, and in that early bad boy Charlie Sheen. By the way, I'm a Charlie Sheen fan. Love Charlie Sheen. And this movie, it's so mindless. It's so goofy. And it's just, let me take a sip of water here for a sec. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I had to take a sip of water. The movie is just so bonkers. It's hard to try to describe that plot, except that's it. It's just a guy skip day. And it got so popular. And one of the things that Ferris was doing at the end, he's talks to us, the viewers. He's talking to us. That's a little different. A lot of movies don't quite go that one. Breaking the Wall down. It's an odd movie. It really is, but it is iconic with the 80s, especially the way that movie ended. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that song, when you hear that song, for anybody that grew up around that era or has seen that movie, you immediately think about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. They joked around about it with the Super Bowl commercial, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, and there have been so many talks about doing a sequel to that, and it never really materialized. And there's been talks of remaking it. You know what? I understand everything is a remake nowadays, a redo, a rehash, whatever you want to call it, updated version. Sometimes I just wish Hollywood would leave stuff alone, because there's just sometimes you're setting yourself up to failure, and you're just not going to be able to top an original. And it's hard enough to do it in a franchise trying to top an original with your sequels. But when you do these redos and these remakes, you're setting yourself up for failure. But Who knows if they'll ever do it? Would I watch it? It would really depend on the trailer. But Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Matthew Broderick, outside the 80s, movie career wasn't too kind, but he did have some movies in during that time frame, such as Ferris Bueller's Day Off, such as War Games, that definitely were big. We won't talk about Godzilla. And but Ferris Bueller's Day Off, wacky, entertaining. I love it. It's just one of those weird movies that if you grew up in the area, you loved it. Outside of it, you look at it and think, what a piece of shit, probably. But what can I say? That was it, it reeked of the 80s too. So that's my number 8, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. All right. Number 7. No comedy here. We're getting to some action, adventure, maybe some science fiction, maybe a little bit. But this is also a franchise. This is a franchise that not only was on the big screen, it was on the little screen because it's had TV shows. Many different it's had several movies, couple of different TV shows, even an animated show. But this is going to be one of those names that I'm going to screw up. If you've listened to the show, you know I brutalize names, so bear with it. It's directed by Russell McCauley. Probably did that name horrifically wrong. Written by Gregory Wyden. It's stars Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, and Clancy Brown. Highlander. Highlander. Now, Highlanders is unique because there are some that would say that the TV show, the original TV show with Duncan MacLeod, is better than all the other movies. I've heard plenty of people say it, and I honestly, I can see your point. I can see your point. Highlander, the movie franchise, lost its way, but it didn't start out that way. This was the first one, and Christopher Lambert, you know, as far as his movie career, some people only think of Highlander. There are some people who think of Greystoke, his Tarzan movie, which is actually a very good movie. And some people think of Mortal Kombat, where he played Raiden, which, if you've listened to this show, you know I did a review on with the guys from Third Generation Wrestling about the most recent Mortal Kombat update. If you want to know what we all thought, of course, go listen. Um, Lambert at this point, you know, when I think of Christopher Lambert, I think of this. I think of Highlander, and I actually own a collector's edition of this movie because I love this of the Highlander movies. This is the best one because Highlander 2 is a mitigated piece of shit that never should have been made and is highly just ignored. Highlander 3 was a little better. 4 was a little better. That had Connor, and I don't want to talk about the fifth one. So I don't even want to mention that thing. It might be actually worse than Highlander 2. So and the TV show, of course, Duncan MacLeod, an amazing TV show. If you like, you know, if you want to go search and try to run through a TV series, go watch Highlander with Duncan MacLeod, not Raven, not Highlander Raven. Do not watch that. That only lasted one season and it was horrible. And I can't believe I actually sat through it all live. But Highlander, this movie just follows an immortal from the clan MacLeod, Scottish, uh, and it just follows this immortal through life. And you would think that being an immortal would be just great. You get to live forever, but you don't really think about it. When you fall in love and they're mortal, you age. They don't, and you see them dying. So you don't open your heart up too much. And that lives to one of the songs in the movie, Who Wants to Live Forever, done by the legendary Queen. and of course they did the theme, basically Prince of the Universe, which ended up being the theme to the TV show. And this is just an amazing movie following Connor McLeod. That's Christopher Lambert's character. And when he becomes an immortal, he gets trained and taught by, no shock, my favorite character, Ramirez. Ramirez is played, of course, by the late, great Sir Sean Connery. And he teaches Connor about being an immortal, which basically, if you follow the Highlander, there can be only one, and you fight for the prize. There's a time called the Gathering, and you fight for the prize to be the final immortal. And the only way to kill an immortal is by cutting off his head. And so, I mean, that's the rules. So, and you can't fight on holy ground. It's an interesting take. It's an interesting world that got created, but it's an amazing world. I actually have a dragon sword, and the reason I got it is because of Highlander. I got the Connor McLeod, or not Connor, Duncan McLeod dragon sword. Or it's made in honor of that show, I should say. But it follows Connor, and one of his enemies is played by Clancy Brown, and he plays Kurgan. Kurgan is this big, meat-headed, just buffoon who is actually the one who killed Connor at the very beginning of the movie, and when he comes back as an immortal, and he's just tormenting Connor, and that's your movie. And does it reek also of the 80s? Completely. But the sword fights, Highlander, that's one thing. Even with the bad Highlander movies, the sword fights are damn good. They're just good. Expert sword fighting. The swords are cool. The special effects, yeah, they got a little cheesy toward the end. But but Highlander is just a great franchise, entertaining franchise. It's had its hits and misses like a lot of franchises do, but this was definitely a hit. And had this failed, had this movie been bad and not been successful, there wouldn't have been the TV show, none of the movies afterward. There wouldn't have been the animated show. There wouldn't have been a toy line. As a kid, I had the toy line for the Highlander animated show, which was weird because nobody ever cut off a head. So I found it kind of weird. Why are we having a cartoon show about a group of people who get in sword fights and cut each other's heads off? You're not going to show that in a cartoon, so what's the point? But I watched it. I bought some of the toys back then, so whatever. But Highlander, it's not everybody's bag. It's definitely different, but I enjoyed it. Great franchise. It's one of those series I keep looking at on Amazon, and I want to buy the box set so bad. I see it sitting there. One of these days, I'm not going to be able to resist, and I'm just going to say the heck with it and just buy it. Uh, but definitely, if you're curious on any of the Highlander movies, this one is definitely the one to watch. Watch Highlander 1. If you don't want to watch any of the others, you just want to see only one, watch the first one. It's the best one. After that, maybe Highlander 3 or 4 would be following, and you can ignore 2 and 5. Just ignore 2 and 5. And you can and definitely recommend watching the Highlander TV show uh, with Duncan MacLeod. Do not watch Raven. Do not watch Highlander Raven. That's the one to avoid. So that's my number 7, Highlander. Oh boy, number 6. This is another one of those iconic movies of the 80s, and it's thankfully a movie. It doesn't reek of the 80s because one, the time of frame of the movie is not of that time, so it's done before. But it's a movie that is aged very well. You're still able to watch this movie, uh, and it just plays very, very well. It's based off of a book again, a novel, I should say. That's a pretty big clue. Directed by Rob Reiner. There's another big clue. The novella was written by Stephen King. Is that another big clue? Stars Will Wheaton, another big clue. River Phoenix, Corey Feldman. Have you figured it out yet? Jerry O'Connell, Kiefer Sutherland. Have we figured this out yet? Maybe not. Okay. Stand by Me. Stand by Me is just this adventure of these four kids, and they decide to go on this childhood journey to find the body of a missing boy. And it's I don't know what it was about this movie that just attached to me, but it's it's just a great movie about friendship and how life can just turn friendships aside on at times. How just how an event can just change everything with a group of friends, and it's just amazing actors, and they were kids. I mean, Will Wheaton, River Phoenix being the standout, definitely, of this group of kids. Very young Kiefer Sutherland in this. Uh, like I said, it's just these kids are going on this adventure to try to find this dead kid, and all the misadventures with leeches and the train and dogs. And of course, the best part of the movie, all I'll say is lardass. If you've watched the movie, you already know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I'm not spoiling it. Watch the movie and you'll know what I'm talking about with lardass. It is the it is my favorite part of the whole damn movie. And it's River Phoenix's career, of course. River Phoenix, we lost River Phoenix extremely early. Uh, he was definitely on pace to be a Hollywood legend, no doubt on that. And he is, unfortunately, it's because he passed away so young, and we are left to think about what more he would have done with his acting career, what other roles he would have gotten. But River Phoenix, just an amazing performance. Will Wheaton, a lot of people just know Will Wheaton from maybe just Star Trek: The Next Generation. Uh, by the time I mean, I knew him on Star Trek: Next Generation. Of course, I'm a Star Trek fan, but Stand by Me was a big movie. He was in a lot of movies. Will Wheaton. He was in Toy Soldiers. I remember that. Another movie that's underrated. I actually love that movie. But this is just a special little heartwarming movie, and it tugs at your heartstrings a little bit. And I don't want to reveal, like the ending and things of that nature. Um, Talking about these kids, what happens to these kids. It's best for you to watch the movie, but the journey you go on with these kids, it's very well written. It's just a very, very great movie. I have the special edition of this. As soon as it came out, I wasn't going to hesitate. I wanted to own this movie. It's just one of those movies that's always stayed with me. And of course, the title song "Stand by Me." I mean, it's just an amazing song as well, by Ben E. King, I believe. And if you remember the video, Will Wheaton and River Phoenix are in the video as well. It's just a great movie. Strongly recommend watching this movie. Just no complaints on Stand By Me. It's an amazing movie, very well acted, very well written. There's just no plot, there's just no holes in this movie as far as I'm concerned. So it earns its spot at number 6 of movies from 1986. We're in the top 5, boy. Here we go. Top 5. Number 5. This is another one of those movies that I rushed to get as soon as I could when they released a special edition. This is also a movie that I actually bought the soundtrack for, because it's one of those movies I love the soundtrack for it. It's largely instrumental. It's instrumental, but I love it. It's by the music is I believe Jerry Goldsmith. Uh if I'm wrong, do apologize, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was. And this is another name I'm going to screw up as far as the director. David Asba. Sorry if I messed up your name. It's written by Angelo Pizzo, stars Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, Dennis Hopper, Hoosiers. This is gonna I'm gonna eventually gonna have to do best sports movies countdown. I'm gonna have to because these sports movies keep popping up, and I'm just gonna eventually have to do it. But man, that's gonna be rough to do it. But Hoosiers is one of the best. It is one of the best sports movies overall, one of the best basketball movies overall. It's just a great movie about a coach with this past, and he's being given a second chance in a nothing little town where basketball is king, and the town, we all have heard about these towns, or you may even live in one of these towns that shuts down when the local high school, not college, not a professional team, high school, the high school team plays and the towns just shut down, whether it be basketball or football. Your town just shuts down, and these kids are king or queen. Uh, we all know, we've all heard these stories, and we've seen many shows like Friday Night Lights that displays this very well. But it's just this little town and this team, Hickory, and this guy with a checkered past is now the coach, and he decides to hire an assistant coach who's a drunkard, who's the dad of one of the kids playing on the team. That's Dennis Hopper's character, and the the town, the town is not liking him. They're against him and everything. They don't like how he is, and it's just this movie where it brings together the coach. It's this redemption story for the coach, the town, these kids. We've seen movies like this, like Remember the Titans, for example, which except that had the background of racism and race as a part of its plot. But Hoosiers is just a great basketball movie, shot very well and loosely based on a true story. By the way, they took some liberties, but it is based off of a true story. By the way, um, of just this little nothing team trying to become state champions, and Gene Hackman is just an amazing, amazing actor, and he's done so much. And people may laugh at me when I say, when people say Gene Hackman, what's the first movie that comes to mind? Well, it's a tie: Superman, Hoosiers. It's interchangeable with me because Hoosiers is so damn good. It really, really is an amazing basketball and sports movie, one of the best sports movies of all time. Again, I'm gonna have to do this damn, sports movie countdown. Maybe I can get somebody to come along with me for that, because that'll be a fun one to do, that kind of a countdown with the sports movies. But Hoosiers, like I said, an amazing soundtrack, an amazing movie, very well written, great acting. Just again, it's just a perfect movie. There's no complaints about Hoosiers. They did everything right in this movie. Some great, great acting in this movie by Gene Hackman and Dennis Hopper, and Barbara Hershey as well. And definitely would recommend watching Hoosiers. It's If you're a basketball fan, I'd be shocked if you haven't already watched Hoosiers. But if you haven't, give it a try. Give it a try. It is a very good movie, and it made it as my number 5 movie from 1986. Hoosiers. Number 4. It's time to start laughing again. This is a comedy. It's action. It's got adventure. It's got a character that is still around through spoofs. They recently, just a few years ago, did another movie with this character, and the poor actor that played this character, some people don't like being typecast, but this guy, there's only one name they're going to know this guy for, and it's Crocodile Dundee. Crocodile Dundee, who was, of course, played by Paul Hogan, stars his wife, uh, Linda Goskowski. Probably said that name horribly wrong. Uh, she plays this reporter, and she decides to go for a story to follow this guy named Crocodile Dundee to retell his story of when he was attacked by a croc and he crawled to civilization and it took him forever. And he's going to guide her on the path that he took. And that's it. That's the movie. And of course, it flips and she decides, well, you showed me your world. I'm going to show you mine. And he, at the continuation of that story, she takes him to New York. So you have this bushman in New York, and the whole movie is just hysterical. I own this the box by box set. I just mean the DVD 2 movie set because they made Crocodile Dundee 2, which I like Crocodile Dundee 2, by the way. Crocodile Dundee 3, we could have done without that one. We could have done without that one. That one was bad. But come on, Crocodile Dundee 1 is just it's hysterical. And of course, one of the standout lines is when he's getting mugged by these guys, and they got this little bitty knife, and Crocodile Dundee is like, "That's not a knife. Oh, that's a knife." And he has this big old Rambo knife. I mean, just just Paul Hogan. They found the right guy to play it. He obviously got typecast because there was nothing else he was going to ever get known for, but it's his own fault because he did the screenplay. So he's his hands are all over this, but to his credit, he doesn't seem to mind it. I mean, he's done commercials with this character. They did the spoof thing, still doing movies, so he doesn't seem to mind the fact that he'll only be known as Crocodile Dundee, which I think I think that's the way you should handle that. I mean, if you can get a role that people remember you for forever, you did a good job. I mean, obviously, you'd like to have several roles that people remember you for. Harrison Ford has a couple, for example. But if you can at least get one, just one, I think he did a pretty good job. And he's a part of Americana history with Crocodile Dundee. And again, this is another thing that I've heard them want to do remakes for. And at one moment they did the joking commercial where it looked like they were actually doing a spoof to it. And I was like, oh God, please don't make this be real. And it was just a commercial. Thank God. But Crocodile Dundee, an amazing movie about this reporter and this weird relationship between her and this Australian bushman, this crocodile poacher named Mick Dundee, and just a great cast of characters. It's truly an entertaining movie. Now, Crocodile Dundee 2, it is not as good as 1. 1 is the better one, definitely. But 2 is still very good. Very easy to watch, very fun. It's still the same characters, it's still entertaining. It just fell a little short comparing it to 1, which it's not its own fault because 1 was just so damn good. It's just an hysterical movie of just seeing this bushman dealing with life in New York, doing things that we normally would do, and him trying to do them and trying to understand it like, a bidet. If you know what it is, that's you know what it is. I'm not going to go down the road of describing that thing. So, just an amazing movie. Crocodile Dundee. Great soundtrack. Again, great theme. And it made it as my number 4 movie from 1986. Oh boy. Number 3. Okay. Okay. I'm going to get in trouble here. I'm going to get in trouble, and I do not care. Certain people are going to be mad at me for even putting this movie in a countdown, or should I say another countdown. because I've mentioned this movie before in a couple of different episodes. This movie, directed by Willard Hayek, stars Leah Thompson, the aforementioned previously, Jeffrey Jones, Tim Robbins, Howard the Duck. I don't care what y'all think. I love Howard the Duck. The movie is so damn funny. It is ridiculously funny. To me, it is the funniest movie from that year. It cracks me up still to this day. I can watch that movie. And as a matter of fact, when I'm done recording this, I'm going to watch Howard the Duck because I own it on Blu-ray, not DVD. That one I actually do own on Blu-ray. It follows another movie. Should I even discuss this plot? It follows the adventures of Howard, a duck. He's from another planet that's where it's the world is just like ours, except instead of humans, they're ducks. And he's sucked into our world. And he's this sarcastic, vulgar duck that just gets pulled into our world where he meets this struggling female rocker played by the very attractive Leah Thompson. And along the way meets this nerdy scientist played by Tim Robbins. And there's just no other reason for me to discuss the plot, because if I discuss it, you're not gonna give this movie a chance, and I so want you to watch it because it's better than what some people may think. It's just you just can't take this kind of a movie seriously. Just watch it and have fun with it. It's one of those movies you can't overly look at it. And if you can just sit back, watch it, and have some fun and have some laughs, it's done its job. And for me, that's what this movie did. I didn't over examine it. I think to this day still that that movie is one of the funniest movies of all time. And I'm not even joking when I say that. Some of you may think I'm smoking something. I'm not. Howard the Duck is just so damn funny. Period. It's one of the best comedies of all time to me. It continues to make me laugh. It has never stopped making me laugh. If I had a counter and knew how many times I've watched movies, Howard the Duck is up there. It's got to be up there. I've watched that movie so many times. And I'm not kidding. When I'm done, I'm going to go and watch Howard the Duck. I'm not even kidding on that. I'm totally going to watch Howard the Duck. So I know there are certain people, yes, Eric, Rob, I'm talking to you. I know you don't like this movie. I know you think it's absolute trash. I I hear you. I just don't agree with you at all. The movie is hysterical. It is a damn good movie, and it made it on this countdown of favorite movies of 1986 as my number 3. So you guys can eat it. I'm kidding on that. I don't mean eat it in a way I kind of do, but y'all know we're just having fun. But Howard the Duck, give it a try. Come on, it's a goofy little movie. It's a classic. It is one of the best movies from that decade, bar none to me. One of the all-time great 80s movies and one of the funniest movies of all time. Howard the Duck. Please give that a watch. And if they would, and I've heard so many times, I've heard them talk about redoing Howard the Duck. And of course, he did pop up in a Marvel movie. I know about that. He popped up in a Marvel movie, and I got hyped. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna do a Howard the Duck. Please do a Howard the Duck. Please do a Howard the Duck movie. And I'm still waiting on it. Still waiting on it. If they do a Howard the Duck movie, I am there. No doubt, I'm there day one. I'll be there day one for that. So that's my number 3, Howard the Duck. Y'all can laugh at me all you want. I do not care. I love Howard the Duck. All right, the runner up. Number 2, Number two, well, as soon as I say the director, it's probably going to give it away. But he did direct some other movies around this time, so you may get confused. But this was directed by Leonard Nimoy. But as soon as I say the writer, you're going to get it. It was written by Nimoy, but also Gene Roddenberry. Stars William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelly. That's right. Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. For if you know me, I'm a Trek. I'm a Trekker. I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and it's one of the biggest franchises to me. And we've had 3 movies at this point, and Harv Bennett, who was a part of the Star Trek franchise, in describing this movie, said, "In going from life, death, and resurrection, it was time to lighten things up a bit." And that's what The Voyage Home is. It's a very light-hearted Star Trek adventure. Of the original crew movies, it is the most opposite of all the Star Trek movies. Because in this movie, if you followed the Star Trek movies that happened previous, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, it's hard for me to say this without revealing plots, but I'm just gonna say it. So if you spoiler alert, if you haven't watched Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, I'm about to give a spoiler. So I'm giving you time if you don't want it spoiled for you, but it ties into the movie. So I can't avoid it. But in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Spock sacrifices himself for the crew and he dies. And Leonard Nimoy at the time was trying to write the character off. He wanted to be done with Star Trek. And the fans, of course, did not very much like it. And he learned that that was a mistake. And so he got into the director's chair for Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, in which they bring him back. And Star Trek 4 basically takes off right after Star Trek 3, essentially, in which Spock's brought back, but his mind is not fully brought back yet. There's gaps, there's holes. He doesn't quite remember everything. And so Spock's different, and on their way back to Earth, because they did some things in Star Trek 3 that were a little illegal to go save their friend Spock, a probe shows up, and this probe is turning off power to any ship that it encounters, and their ship's life support systems fail, and basically leaves them floating to die. And it's attacking Earth now. And the same thing is happening to Earth. It's vaporizing its oceans, it's taking the oxygen supply. Basically, the people of Earth are going to die because of this probe. And let me take a sip of water real quick. Ah, whew. Thank you for that. And the crew of the Enterprise in a Klingon vessel. You'll have to watch the movies to discover why they're in a Klingon ship. Discover that what's going on, and they listen to the probe, and they discover that the sound it emits is the sound produced by humpback whales. They figure, okay, let's find a humpback whale. Maybe it'll talk to it and tell it to go away. But humpbacks are extinct. So they come up with the plan of, well, let's go find some humpbacks the only way we know how. We'll travel back in time to the 80s where there are humpbacks. And that's what The Voyage Home gets, where it gets a little off the wall. You have this 23rd century crew trying to move around 20th century Earth, in the 1980s, and it's just funny. See, it's just funny seeing them react to the technology of the time, which at the time that technology was that's what the technology was. There's no starships, there's no computers that were talking back to you. All the technology that they're used to on starships does not exist. Real alcohol, real food instead of the food that they're it just everything is different. Public transportation. And through all of this, of course, Spock is still not, regained himself mentally. So you have that little adventure. It is a different movie. It's very lighthearted, but it makes it so good that it is that lighthearted. I didn't mind it. They did it right. And the Star Trek franchise at this point really had no misses. I love Star Trek 1, the motion picture, love Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, love Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, love Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, obviously. It made it at the runner up spot. It was Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier, unfortunately, that was the absolute turd of the original franchise. And I hate saying that because I love William Shatner and William Shatner directed it. Nothing would please me more than to say that's the best of the Star Trek original crew movies, but it's not. It was the worst. And they would end it with Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, which is one of the best Star Trek movies overall. So, Star Trek franchise overall did a great job. If you want to know where I place that in my movie franchise list, you're going to have to listen to find out where it was because it's in there somewhere, but you're going to have to find out where by listening. And like I said, just a very lighthearted adventure into the world of Star Trek. And it's the most different of all the Star Trek movies, and it holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. Somehow they did this right. I mean, this could have been an absolute disaster of an idea, but they did it and they did it well. They did it right. They had the right crew to do it, the right people who were around, the right writers. This is when Star Trek was good, which for a Star Trek fan, it's been a long time with what that bastard J.J. Abrams has done. What the TV shows have done lately. Now, I haven't seen Picard because I'm honestly scared. I'm just scared to watch it. I've had opportunities and I'm just scared to watch that damn thing. But this is back when Star Trek was just great. It was just good to go and see a Star Trek movie in December or so. November, December, that's typically when the Star Trek movies are always coming out around that time. It was a great time to be a Star Trek fan. And that's why this gets the runner up spot. Some of you who are Star Trek fans might have thought that I would put this at number one, and I almost did, but something does beat it out just barely. But number two, runner up, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Oh boy. Before we get to number one, let's do a quick rundown of what we had before. Number 10 was The Fly. Number 9 was Manhunter, not DC's, Martian Manhunter. Number 8 was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 7 was The Highlander. Number 6, Stand By Me. 5, Hoosiers. 4, Crocodile Dundee. 3, Howard the Duck. That's for you, Eric and Rob. And number 2, runner up, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Number 1. You know what? Part of me wanted to put Star Trek as number 1. But of the franchise of the original crew, it's not even my favorite of the Star Trek movies of the original crew. It's not. It's like third, which is not an insult. It's just the two above are just awesome. This movie, which is also a part of a franchise, is a part of a debate because some people think that this is the best of the franchise. Some people think another movie in the franchise was better. And this is one of those times where a sequel might actually beat out the original. It depends on which side of the argument you're on. But this movie was directed by James Cameron. No, this is not a Terminator movie. but it does star a kick-ass person, and there's definitely some science fiction in it. But this kick-ass person is a woman. That should tell you who it is, right? What it is, right there. Sigourney Weaver, Michael Biehn, starring in, and Lance Henderson as well. Aliens. What other movie could be number one but Aliens? Bill Paxton is also in this movie. The late Bill Paxton, rest in peace to Bill. Uh, Come on, Aliens had a lot to live up to. I mean, it was following Alien, one of the greatest horror slash sci-fi movies of all time. That's a whole lot to live up to. Could this movie do that? Could it live up to that? Somehow it did. And they did it with the right writing, which was James Cameron, and the director was James Cameron. They did this. They did it. I mean, it's one of those rare opportunities where a sequel could possibly be better than the original. I go on both sides of it. There are some ways that this is better than Alien. There are some ways that Alien is actually better than Aliens. It's interchangeable, but that's a great compliment because not a lot of movies do that, where the sequel can cause a debate. Not a lot of them can do that. The Dark Knight trilogy, you have The Dark Knight, arguably the best of the Dark Knight trilogy. I mean, to me, that's just no argument. But I have heard there's a small portion that does think that Batman Begins is better than The Dark Knight. But the fact that you can have a discussion, that's just a great compliment. Godfather, another legendary one. Star Wars, the original trilogy. Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars. To me, Empire, no doubt. But I know people who say Star Wars. They were the first one. So the fact that you can have the argument is a great, great compliment when a sequel is so good. And this one was tremendously good. This takes place 57 years after the events from Alien. And the Space Marines, combined with a cryogenically frozen for 57 years Ellen Ripley, played by the beautiful Sigourney Weaver, and she's still hot. I don't care what anybody says. And unfortunately, they go to a place that is inhabited by the aliens, the xenomorphs. And you only had one to deal with, an alien. This, you have a whole planet full of them. And the violence, the action, the music, the lines, such as Bill Paxton has the legendary line from this. He has the legendary line. And you would think, but there's other people who have legendary lines, like Sigourney Weaver. Get away from her, you bitch. I mean, it's it's just amazing how damn good this movie was. It just was, and it caught me completely off guard. I own the box set of Aliens, sadly, and it's sadly because of what happened after. After we got Alien 3, which is a mess, and the story, if you want, the studios and the directors fighting with each other, and the movie ended up becoming a mess. And let's not talk about the fourth one. Resurrection. Let's just not talk about Alien Resurrection. I mean, that was just bad. But Aliens is Lance Hendrickson, an underrated actor, stars in one of my favorite TV shows ever, Millennium. Uh, an underrated actor. I've mentioned him before on here because of Millennium. It, just a This is just a fun movie, and the violence, of course, is there. Lots of violence, and but you gotta love it. The science fiction, the adventure. Uh, they this is There's been video games of this. This has spawned off its own separate kind of franchise with Alien versus Predator, which, yeah, I don't think we want to talk about that franchise too much because that's been pretty much hit or miss. But Aliens is just one of those few times where a sequel can be so damn good. And it honestly, if I'm honest with myself, of the Aliens movies, the one that I've watched the most is Aliens. I've watched that more than Alien. And I love Alien. But if I had a gun to my head and somebody asked me which one's better, Alien or Aliens, probably I would say Aliens. If I'm going to be honest, I think Aliens might be a smidget better than Alien, which it's not a rip because Alien is very, very good. These are the two best movies hands down in the franchise. But it took a gigantic dump after that. And they've been talking about remakes and sequels up the yin yang. Uh, I've heard that Sigourney Weaver's coming back for a movie. I've heard somehow Michael Bean's coming back. Uh, there's been so much talk about another Aliens movie. Um, I would watch it, obviously, but I would be paying attention to that trailer because Alien Resurrection was such a piece of shit that I just have to be careful. I would have to be careful because it was so bad, and I couldn't tolerate another bad movie. I just couldn't. I mean, it's kind of the same way I feel about Terminator. After Terminator 3, I was like, ugh, 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 and I pretty much stopped watching Terminator movies after that because they just weren't good. I watched the TV show for like a second, hated it, and then I was really done. So, Aliens is number one, the best movie of 1986. And again, one of the great compliments I can give this, and this shouldn't even be a story, but have to, because it was a big deal at the time. And certain movie has decided to make things like this a big deal. It was a woman. It's Sigourney Weaver kicking ass, taking names. Because even to this day, you still hear some people who think that a movie like that can't work with a woman in the lead, which to me is ridiculous. All you have to do is look at Wonder Woman, the first one, not the second one. That movie is genius. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Nailed it. They nailed that movie perfectly. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But then you get movies like the Ghostbusters, the one where the cast was female, and it gets all political and things of that nature. It shouldn't be this. It shouldn't matter that it's a woman or a man. It should be just, is the movie good? But some people force that debate on us. So, for the nature of those people, here you go. This is another movie. And this is one of those early movies for me seeing a woman kicking ass. I loved it. I didn't find it a big deal back then. I thought it was just cool. I didn't see anything wrong with it. But I remember as a kid, there'd be people thinking, that should have been a dude. I'm like, what? Who cares? Who cares? But Aliens, number one, the best movie from 1986, one of the best franchises. Did that maybe make it in my movie franchise list? Again, you might want to listen. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Go listen and find out. But that's numero uno for 1986. And that's our countdown. What do you think? What were some of your favorite movies from 1986? Did I forget some? Because it did have that year had some other movies in it, like Top Gun came out that year. Iron Eagle came out that year. Karate Kid 2 came out that year. The animated movie Transformers, that came out that year. Pretty in Pink, which I do love that movie. Lucas, Big Trouble in Little Chinatown. I know there's some of you that might be thinking, where is that? I just mentioned it. Back to School, which I love. The Hitcher, Short Circuit, Police Academy 3, Back in Training, Space Camp, Flight of the Navigator, um, Jumping Jack Flash. I don't care what you think. I love that movie. Haunted Honeymoon, The Hitcher. I mean, it was a fully packed year of very, very good movies. And these just happen to be my favorites. So what are your favorites? Do you have any ideas you want to give me? Communicate with me. Tell me what you think. You have your own list, your own ideas. There are many ways you could do that. Plus, there are many different ways you can listen to the show. You can email me. Just email the countdown2020 at gmail.com. You can go on the Facebook page. Just search at the countdown 2020 podcast one. You can go on to Twitter. Just search at the countdown PO1. You can listen to the show on Spotify. Just search the countdown 2020. You can go on Instagram as well. Just search the countdown 20. You can listen to the show on Amazon Audible. Just search the countdown podcast. All are available through podbean.com. Just search on Podbean, the Countdown Podcast. And of course, if you're watching, you already know it. But in case you're not and you're listening somewhere else in one of those other means, I'm also on YouTube. You can search the YouTube channel, just search the Countdown Podcast with MJ Book. And you can watch on camera, or you can just listen to the audio there. There's only a few episodes up from season 2, nothing from season 1 yet. For season 1, I recommend definitely going over on to podbean.com or going on to Spotify, Podbean, listen to those two for the early archives of the shows. Or I was talking about movie countdowns of horror movies and best and worst of DC and Marvel. A lot of those episodes are on there. Also want to take this time to thank Incomtech.com for the royalty-free music Ice Flow by Kevin MacLeod that you hear at the beginning and end of every episode. Also want to throw out a shout out to Third Generation Wrestling. If you're a professional wrestling fan, they are definitely the guys to listen to. It's hosted by The Real Big E and the Ambassador Rob. I am a contributor onto the show. We recently did an episode for WrestleMania Backlash, stupid name. We're going to be getting together again because there's going to be an AEW pay-per-view, Double or Nothing. Can't wait for that. Of course, we got together and did the Mortal Kombat review. And who knows, there may be a couple more episodes coming up in the next few weeks. Definitely check out Third Generation Wrestling. They are also available on all the avenues I just said, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I believe they have a YouTube. I don't know if they're on Amazon Audible. I believe they are. They're available through all the means. Definitely look those guys up. They've been great contributors and great parts of the show. And that's all I got for you. And I will catch you all again on the next episode of The Countdown. Have yourself a great day or evening, whatever time it is. Have a great day. Bye-bye.